Reuters Breakingviews editor Hugo Dixon says Greeks are facing a dilemma worthy of the ancient poet Homer. In his epic, Odysseus has to steer his ship between the sea monster Scylla and the whirlpool Charybdis. Modern Greeks, for their part, must choose between the pain of sticking with the euro and the chaos of bringing back the drachma. Hugo is with me now. Hugo, fascinating piece. You argue that Greeks should vote to stay in the euro because the pain of coming back to the drachma would be too great. But is it as straightforward as that?
I mean, it's not as straightforward as that, because the election that comes on Sunday isn't actually a vote between staying in the euro or bringing back the drachma.
It is billed as that, isn't it?
Well, it is, except that pretty much all of the parties, even the radical left Syriza party, is saying that they want to stick with the euro. They just don't want to have any of the programme that you need in order to stick with the euro. And then there's the other main challenger, which is the conservative New Democracy Party. They say that they also want to stick with the programme, and they want to stick with the euro. But even if they come first in this election, they will not have an overall majority, and there's a big amount of doubt over whether they'll actually be able to. I mean, they'll be able to stick with it in the short term, but whether they'll be able to stick with it in the long term. And so my own view is that Greece will probably need to have a third election this year before things are resolved. But I do think that there is this key dilemma whether you go through the pain of the austerity and the reform, or whether you come out and go for the chaos of the drachma.
But what's wrong with going through the pain, the short-term pain of ditching the euro, going back to the drachma? Undoubtedly that would be short-term pain, but the long-term gain would be return to competitiveness, be able to export more, etc., as economists such as Marty Feldstein have advocated.
Yes, but look, this is not, though, a classic case where you could have a devaluation. There are two reasons that distinguish the Greek situation, say, even from the Argentinian position or the Icelandic position. And they are, first of all, that they don't have a drachma, so they have to reintroduce it. That means that all of the legal contracts would be thrown up in the air. It also means that the banking system would be severely messed up, as people wouldn't be able to get cash out of the cash machines, and that would lead to a big dislocation in the economy. That's one thing. The second thing is that that at the moment there is a €130 billion programme of cheap loans that Greece is benefiting from. That is 88% of GDP. If they quit, they won't get that bailout. They will then have to have a massive squeeze, both of their budget, which will require more austerity, and of their current account, where they have this big deficit. That will mean that imports will have to be slashed. The whole economy it won't just hurt the people who won't be able to import. It will actually hurt the businesses that need to import, which is then part of the inputs of their own production and export process. And so these are reasons why the Greek situation is dramatically different from a classic devaluation where the sort of Feldstein analysis or that of others might well apply.
But you can understand, of course, why people would say 5 years of this economic and, up to a point, social hell, why should we vote for more of this? But you advocate a three-point plan, which the incoming government must take. Includes more time to meet their deficit targets, more debt write-downs. This is the kind of thing that should have been done years ago.
Well, the first debt restructuring should have happened 2 years ago, and it should have been deeper. This is true. But also the governments that the Greeks have had over the last couple of years have dawdled. And if you go back to the image of Scylla and Charybdis, I mean, Scylla was a six-headed monster, and Odysseus decided it was best to go close to Scylla because each head only gobbled up one of his men. If he'd gone for Charybdis, the whole ship would have been sucked through the whirlpool. But what Odysseus said is, he said, row as fast as you can and don't stop. The problem is that the Greek governments haven't rowed as fast as they could, and so they've dawdled around the place, and Scylla has kept munching men after men. As they digest another man, out comes the head, swoops down and grabs 6 more. And so it's not a pleasant situation. However, it still is a question of a choice between the lesser of two evils.
You say a third election might be required, and you're talking there about dawdling and taking time. Surely the last thing, certainly markets would want, is another election.
I think it would be disaster if there was another election in, say, 4 or 5 months' time after, say, the New Democracy, the Conservatives get in and they then can't hack it. I think that would be a disaster. I think that a second election rapidly, a third election rapidly after the radicals come in, if they come in, the money is then turned off, and then their government collapses, that could paradoxically be just what Greece needs.
Why would that government necessarily collapse? If that's the will of the people, if that's the vote, why should it necessarily collapse?
Well, because neither party is going to get an overall majority. And therefore, even if Syriza comes in, they will either be governing as a minority or they will require a support of another party. At the moment when the cash gets turned off, the Greek people will wake up to the enormity of the problem that they're facing, and they might finally come to their senses.
Okay, Hugo, well, we'll find out on June 17, only 6 days away. Hugo, thank you very much. My thanks there to Breaking Views editor, Hugo Dixon. And you can see the European edition of our Breaking Views commentary show each weekday at 9:30 GMT. I'm Jamie McGeever. This is Reuters.